Welcome to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion. Here we will be delving deeply into those dark corners of psychology that few have the courage to acknowledge, the evil that exists within the female psyche. This series aims to offer you viable solutions, resources, and potent insights that can aid you in your rehabilitation and empowerment. But be forewarned, this is a series not for the faint of heart, nor is it for the easily triggered. Rather, it is only for those courageous women who realize the severity of the hour humanity is in. This means if you're going to listen to this series, you need to be ready to take self-ownership over your reactions and your responses. Because while women do hold the power to change the world, the state and quality of that change will invariably be influenced by how well a woman knows her own psyche, how beautiful, honorable, and dignified that woman chooses to become. If you are a woman who is choosing to willfully evolve, if you are a woman who sincerely desires to master yourself, your mind, and your behavior, then the information shared throughout this series will serve you well. Hi, Michael. Thanks for being here today for our episode in the series of the dark side of the female psyche. You've been getting into its many layers, like I've been describing it as, and I don't mean this in a hyperbolic way, I'm quite serious. It's like you're painting the Sistine Chapel here. Like this is very, very deep information that with each pass, you're adding more to the picture, and the more clear the picture is coming into form. And so I really encourage people to listen to all the episodes in this series and listen carefully, because what Michael is saying, although at times, especially for women, we may get emotionally triggered by what we hear, what's most important is that we listen to what Michael's saying, because what he's saying is very valuable, very insightful, and he's describing, like very few on this planet, really no one I know, what is actually going on with our psyche and why we're dealing with what we're dealing with, especially as women. So Michael, please feel free to jump in wherever you like, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, well, no, just thanks again for giving me the opportunity on this subject. I'm pretty picky about who I go on to talk about this with. You and I have spoken offline, of course, and you've been on Enslaved multiple times, and you have that ability to rationally and conscientiously appreciate this thesis, which could be triggering, normally. So I understand that, but it's also imperative, given our times, that at least we lay down some of the basics. And as we'll see today, there's even another impetus to do that, and that is because from the very first waves of feminism, we even have male writers with bias who deliberately wrote their works. They're part of the women's studies movement, but they biased their works so that they knew that this new coterie of female readers who were degreed would find content that they could use as they built this thing out into the third and second, third, and fourth waves of feminism. And you have to plow through that bias when you're dealing with this study. And the Frankfurt School, to whom they belonged or took a mandate, are very clever people. And so they were able to create a kind of a porridge in which there's a lot of stuff going on, mixing. And therefore, the person who's reading this work has to discern. They've got to use a lot of discernment because there's a lot of truth in their works. There's a lot of elements, say, of Freud and other Freudian psychologists, that really is accurate. But then it has this admixture of content that is not as empirically valid. Let's put it that way. And a newbie, they knew that a newbie is not going to know the difference. So I specialize in those authors who do know the difference. Some of them are dissenting feminists who are honest enough to see the light. And then, there are other scholars too. And just to my own discernment, I've been sort of born with this discernment to be able to tell from people's writings what's screwy and what violates their own logic, their own narrative. Even though these people are coming, it's quite iconoclastic to do this, because the people I'm talking about are at the top of the totem pole intellectually. So that creates a problem, because why is anybody going to believe me, right? I don't even hold a degree, nothing like it. But I still believe in that skill. I have enough self-esteem to say, no, I can argue with you. It's my right. And if I find inconsistencies in your work, I'm going to mention it to my audience to get the thing footnoted, to get the thing straightened out. And this is done reverently so that I'm not taking away from some of the absolutely marvelous revelations that your work has. I'll give you that. And so that, we'll look at a couple of hardcore examples of this today, hopefully, in the slides, and bring this out more, because I think it hasn't been done properly before. I've just assumed that my audience knows this and trusts me, so to speak, but I'd like at this point to give some concrete proof as to what I'm talking about.
Lovely. Well, I'm very, very excited to go into what you have to share today. So we can, would you like to start with the slides now?
Yeah, the first one we saw before. I promised that when we did this show, we'd pick up on a slide that we had before. It's about the idealization of woman. If we could read that so that the people who've been following us have a reminder, so they don't have to physically go back and listen, we'll pick up from where I mentioned this slide before.
Yes.
And it'll set the tone.
Okay, sure. This slide is titled Women Idealized. And it says, women at this stage is the repository of all culture, of all benevolence, of all devotion, of all concern for the living and grief for the dead. Yet the love that arises from motherhood is not only more intense, but also more universal. Whereas the paternal principle is inherently restrictive, the maternal principle is universal. The paternal principle implies limitation to definite groups, but the maternal principle, like the life of nature, knows no barriers. From Erich Fromm in his work, Love, Sexuality, and Matriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Now, you see, this is an example. First of all, it's flowery. First of all, it idealizes women. Thirdly, it depreciates men. It's that although it sounds flowery, a hardcore feminist, can immediately use that, if you see my trend, to denigrate men. Men are not limited. Men are not constricted. They built the world. They're the most highly creative people on the planet. They built the universities. They built the printing press. They built the computers on which this Erich Fromm can write. He lived in a sumptuous luxury in Switzerland, in a fancy apartment in Basel, taught in all the universities all over the world. He needed an airplane, didn't he, to fly to these places constantly. He was picked up in a limousine, wasn't he? He was given awards. What's that got to do with any women's creativity? So this idealization, the woman biologically produces man and woman. All right, are we going to sing the praises of that till the nth fucking degree? And even if you are singing the praises of it, go right ahead. But don't use it to depreciate man's intellectual and creative achievements. How dare you? Especially when you're sitting on your ass in the and the institutions that man has built have awarded you with your prestige. So it is one of the most perfect examples of this duplicity that goes on, and it was perfected, polished in the Frankfurt School, because they had great teachers. They themselves had very critical people. One of the most important books to ever be coming out of their school was called Negative Dialectics. It's a sort of a take on Hegel's teachings, but Horkheimer or Adorno, all these people, they're calling it negative dialectics. They're into deconstruction. They're into critical theory. But as I said, the only people who fall shy of the critical theory is themselves. So it's bankrupt from the start. And on other programs I've done elsewhere, you see, I get into the whole microscopic history of how they developed this necrophilous philosophy. It didn't come out of the clear blue sky. It's quite a monster. It's quite a Frankensteinian monster. And it was stitched together piece by piece in the most fascinating and interesting way. And evil creates nothing of its own, right? Those pieces that it got stitched together all come from the greatest minds we've ever known on this planet, but in mutilated form. You see? And then they were stitched together by some Dr. Frankensteins, and this monstrosity was then, unleashed into the world. And they all did it because they were in a panic that the political Marxism, the dialectical materialism hadn't worked. In fact, it didn't only not work, it was a monstrous travesty as a philosophy, thrown out 100%. And I have the neo-Marxists admitting this over and over again in their own writings, right? Admitting it, full blown, that Marxism failed, and the towers were burning. That every single time that any of the theories of Marx looked like they had been made practical, it was almost the opposite of what had been predicted by Marx that came to pass, in small ways and in big ways. And it was humiliating to these, neo-Marxists. But instead of giving up the ghost, instead of throwing it into the trash bin of history, they repurposed it into cultural Marxism, which Karl Marx himself had nothing to do with. You see? But your Antonio Gramsci's, and your Howard Lasky's, and your Rosa Luxemburg's, and all sorts of kooks from mental asylums, your Saul Alinsky types, they went to work to re-massage this. Theodor Adorno, Horkheimer, all the Frankfurt School. And they knew that they had to infuse it with some very interesting paradigms that came out of the world of idealism and romanticism specifically, but other teachings as well. Good, positive stuff that you can really wrap your mind around, right? So they had to infuse a lot of that, because that's what evil does, for the window dressing aspect. And so they drew on the teachings of some very fine people, but they also drew on the teachings of not so fine people, like Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, and people like that, whose own philosophies are deeply contradictory. Schopenhauer particularly, but even Nietzsche. I've shown in detail in other work how that is, where the contradictions are. And they're not obvious. That's why it's been, promoted for so long. Or Charles Darwin would be another one. What nonsense you got in there? So to make a long story short, the Frankfurt School and Erich Fromm, brilliant man as he was a member of the Frankfurt School. So he had been trained there. He learned some of these ways, and sadly, for all of the genius elements of his work, you get this kind of bias. But then, to counterpoint it, let's go to the next quote, because then this will give you an example of the extraordinary seesaw effect, in which you can have one paragraph, which is full of this duplicity, and another one which is extraordinarily brilliant and insightful. Let's do that.
Okay. The slide's titled Female Aggression. And this is from Anatomy of Human Destructiveness by Erich Fromm. It states that male aggression is basically different from female destructiveness or cruelty is confirmed by the fact that there is no evidence whatsoever that would lead to the assumption that women are less destructive or cruel than men.
See? I mean, that contradicts his first statements. First, he's telling you that universal love and brotherhood of man and the biophilia is almost entirely rested in the woman, and then goes on to tell you that, well, it's actually even Stevens when it comes to the violence and destructiveness of women, or research tells us. Right. So I call that a contradiction, because you're 2 steps away from telling me that women's violence could, even on another pass, look worse. You don't say that, but it's almost about tomorrow's research might show us that that is the case. In fact, some of it has. So get your story right. But the thing is, he couldn't get his story right, because some of the teachings that he embodied are disobeying natural law, are disobeying human logic, and are not consistent with empirical facts. And he knew it, or at least he was plagued by doubt, as many of these writers are. So if you read the lies or the half-truths, you would normally take a man like that after one reading of his book and throw it aside. But see, I'm unique because I didn't. I don't throw aside their works just because I see these biases. I still, hold some of them up and laud them. And as you just saw this amazing quote, even though it's from the same person. And what you have to do then is develop this perspectival aspect to be able to see the bias and be able to reconcile it and just say, okay, I'll point this out I'll footnote this to audiences, but we have to proceed. We're in the dark. It is difficult terrain, and it's made harder by some of these biases. You're never going to find a single scholar out there who's not. So it's just something you have to get used to and arm yourself to know about. But let's go on to the next one, too.
The dogmatic view. One other nuance concerns the creation of the child's superego. It is directly rooted in the attraction of the mother. The child's erotic connection to the mother, whether caused by her or not, inevitably makes the father a rival. The first strong emotion that the child may have towards his father, then, other than love, is hate. And this hatred can be of a very intense nature, especially if the father tends to be sadistic or prohibitory. Since the emotion of hatred is strong but taboo, the only way to overcome it is to identify with the father and all he stands for. And that is another quote from Erich Fromm in his work Anatomy of Human Destructiveness.
So here we have a man positing the origins of hate in his works. And right off the bat, the mother is exonerated. So now you see why I wrote Dragon Mother. I'm not accepting that. I know it's completely bogus, 100% bogus. So why does it exist in black and white in a man of such eminence? I can't bring myself to believe that he believed this. Not only is it denigrating the father, he's giving an origin of hatred, the emotion of hatred. So he's again saying that the origin of the emotion of love is entirely and exclusively focused on the mother, and that the emotion of hatred is entirely and exclusively focused on the male, the father. Is there anybody out there who believes that? Yes, they're called feminists, and they rule our world today. And a feminist author will give this to her daughter. A feminist teacher will speak from Princeton, from the stage at Princeton, or Cornell, and Harvard, and Brown, and Columbia. The feminist who believes this will speak on Piers Morgan, and on the BBC, and on CBS and CNN, to broadcast this nonsense. And then they'll get people believing them. Now, let's carry on with the quote, though.
The identification is, however, not only with the stereotypical, but with the archetypal male. The hatred towards the masculine strengthens masculine power on a collective level. The identification with the masculine is responsible for much of the horrid corruption of the world. This identification will be gratuitously accepted by the father, who offers rewards for the child's allegiance. The child's love of the father will be, for here on, a pseudo-love, one based on underlying repressed and unacknowledged anger and hate.
So this is about as garbled as you can get. In one breath, he's telling you that women are equally as destructive as men. And in the other, he's telling you that all hatred and even false love is connected to the father, right? The father is screwing up. Because when the child now tries to identify with the father, it's pseudo-love. There, it's written right in black and white. I didn't write that. And as I said from the previous slide, if there's a thing called hatred, it's exclusively arisen from the male's presence. Well, we know that to be false. How can anyone write that with a straight face? That means the mother is so utterly deified that she can never be a terrible mother, full of resentment for her own existence and life. Her autolog isn't going to affect the child in the womb, when even modern pediatric science has proven that that's not true. Neurology. When anyone knows that the time in the womb is an eternity, in which you are now, you have no individuality at all, you are a completely emanation, an appendage of the female psyche. And the psyche is the body, and the body is the psyche. And all the stresses and difficulties that your mother is experiencing, not just during pregnancy, but the whole of her life, is pouring into your cells and into your neurons and into your fibers. And then later on, as we said, through the Oedipal system, there's no hatred towards a mother who's mistreating you on a fundamental level, holding you back from the phallic stage. That's why we had to talk about that before last week. And that's just one violation. It's a huge one, but there's others. The incest, the ability to sully your perspective of the male world through the mother's eyes, because in the symbiotic connection, it's the mother to whom you're primarily related. So she has dominion and suzerainty over your perspectives, not the father. He comes on too late for that. Your primal identification is with the mother. How can Erich Fromm talk as if he doesn't know any of this? How can he attribute all hate and basically evil and pseudo-love to your relationship with the masculine? He's also saying in reverse that no man can truly love his son or daughter. He doesn't say that, but it's implied by what he says. If the child's love towards the father is pseudo-love, well, we can take it that the love from the father to the son in reverse can't be true either. He's a man with children. Did he believe that? Or is he speaking from the hymn sheet of the Frankfurt School at this point? I tell you, I know which it is. And this is then fueling the narrative of the feminists. But let's go on.
A shallow account. The person obsessed in this way who embodies this kind of pathology either becomes a fanatical religious convert or a sadistic abuser of women. He blames them for putting him at odds with God, with the world, and with his own masculinity. So the hatred for the male, which is rarely acted upon, rebounds back to the self and passes eventually to the mother. Again from Erich Fromm.
Now he's attempting to create bogus psychology. Now that the emotion of hatred is awakened by the father, that hatred can now free float. It can be free form. It can turn back on one's own self. He's insisting that that is the case. And now, in one of its, as it roams around, this hatred is now free floating. It can focus on the mother, the poor innocent one. You terrible daddy. Oh, you terrible male. Now that you've awakened this hatred that's ballooning around, it can alight like a fly anywhere it fucking wants. This hornet is now able to turn back on myself. So this is, he's trying to say the origin of masochism would be a derivative of this male hatred. How terrible the man is for creating this syndrome. Where's the fucking proof of that? And where's the proof that finally it can even turn back on mom, but she's not doing anything? She doesn't deserve it. Oh, Erich Fromm is stretching reality to the point of obscenity. But he knows he gets away with it. Because if somebody like me was to come up, stand up and go, excuse me, Captain Kirk, stop, got a question for God. Where's your proof? You go, look at male violence. Male violence, the patriarchy. Male violence, any woman who's embodied this nonsense. Male violence, male violence, male violence, male violence. Everybody goes back, oh, well, sorry, we don't want to bring that up. Yeah, you're right. I'll accept all of this doctrine. They're killing themselves laughing. Because you've got this one big bugbear, that gets all women and all feminized types off the hook immediately should you try to confront them. They'll wheel out male oppression in the large so that you don't dig down deep into these contradictions. These books are bestsellers. It's all over the fucking place. You get a bunch of, TV time all over the world. And the feminists can't believe their luck, because here's a man writing as if he's an expert on female psychology, and they just hook on it. This is what I'm telling you that happened. Whereas first wave feminism might have, exhausted itself, it got a shot in the arm. So your second and third waves, you see, were now mobilized during the late 60s and 70s with these male writers. L.E. Sagan would be even worse. And there's others. Not just the females, so everybody can talk about. Your Kate Millets, Gloria Steinems, and Dworkins, and all this type, right? And later your Susan Faludis and what have you, right? No. There's also males in there. Massively bankrolled. But now he's trying to tell you that this hatred, like some sort of a predatory vampire, can free float around and start contaminating your relationship with yourself, which is masochism. He's tricking you, right, into thinking that's the origin of masochism. That the father and your relationship with the son is so necrophilous and hateful in comparison to the biophilic relationship with your mother, that the poison of it leaks out and contaminates the whole family constellation. I'm telling you it's the opposite. I'm telling you that before you even get to understand that there is a father and what he stands for, all of the things he's talking about are already in place through the incestuous symbiosis with the mother and all the things we've talked about. But let's go on.
Embodied imagos. How the mother acts towards the father as a wife will be noticed by the child. How she relates to him and to other men will be a major factor in his moral makeup, and the child is bound to question at some point why the mother chose the father at all. What is it about this kind of male that she found and finds attractive? This is the model for the son now, who will base his masculinity on his own father or on other men that his mother endorses with her approval and emotional overtures. After all, the child will want a woman just like his mother, and to get that kind of woman, he must model himself on his father, the man that his mother, a woman, chose. And again, that's from Erich Fromm, and in parentheses at the bottom it says, mother's influence is primary due to incestuous symbiosis.
Now, we've always only hinted at this, but here's a concrete passage that really helps us finally nail it. That's why we have to do things in order. And I didn't dig deep in this earlier because there were other things that were more important. Now comes the time to look at this more strictly. The mother is the one who, by her chit-chat, by her daily comments, and just by her physical energy, is able to mold her child, this is her daughter or son's, perspective on the males that are around, namely the father. You mentioned earlier on a show that we did that the television is culprit here, or shows going way back even to the early 70s show the father's a dork. Remember that? You mentioned this. Yeah. And by God, is it true? It just got worse and worse and worse. So this is what we're talking about. Everybody's smarter than him. Everybody. And everybody's picking up after his mistakes. So this is the sort of where we're at with that. And the child then is going to also, remember we also touched on something we didn't follow up on then, which is that the image of the female splits in these before the phallic stage, and around the phallic stage. In fact, Key to the phallic stage, let's get this really clear, key to your passing through the phallic stage successfully, the mother, the image of the female must split into mom and woman. Before that, in the oral and anal, you're not aware that your mother is a woman who's attractive to other men and can be attractive to you. The element, there's eroticism, but it's not sexual yet. And it needs to be, because this is going to get you through the phallic. And the goodly mother knows exactly what's happening, and she supports it in multiple ways. We don't have time to explain. But of course, the negative mother, right, the terrible mother, is going to make a mess of this. Okay, so she holds the child back and arrests his development, so he can't pass through this correctly. But one thing he might do, the child, is going to toy with the idea of, why did mom attract this man? She must love him or like him. He's daddy. So I want to build myself. I want to make myself attractive. And since mom, whom I love more than anything else, like that kind of man, I'm going to be that kind of man. So I want to dress like him. I want to act like him. I want to behave like him, and so on. So this is where one of the imagos, which we said is going to be key to the formation of the superego, gets installed. We're just doing a bit deeper dive on that. If the mother, however, is basically dissatisfied with the male and tries to show it to the child at the breakfast table every morning, look at that idiot. Oh, he's so incapable. He can't do anything. And she can do it just by a nudge, just by a frustrated look. As soon as the father turns his back, she's shrugging or even openly rowing with the father constantly. What is the little child going to experience? He's going to say, she doesn't like him. But the problem is, how do I not be like my dad? I have no model. So let's go on, please.
Father Imago. If the father is reprehensible, he may side with the mother and understand her regret. In this case, however, he can be denied a strong masculine model, which can negatively affect his goal orientation, creativity, and libido. But it is one thing to emulate a good father that is loved and endorsed by mother. Another thing to act in a way that is the opposite to the father, should the mother be of a contrary disposition. How can a young child know what not to do, or how to not be like his father? And in parentheses at the bottom of the slide we can see it says, child may grow to despise competitiveness.
So there you have it. How can a child, given that he's now got an ambivalent connection to his father through the eyes of the mother, remember, when I say through the eyes of the mother, this means that the father can be completely different. We're not talking about the father as he is. We're talking about how he appears to the mother. But now that he's got this ambivalent image of the father and says, well, Dad, I don't want to be like you or anything like you because mother doesn't like you. She regrets marrying you. But the problem there, as Fromm is rightly saying, how can the child know what not to do? He only has the father imago. And so the mother is steeping him in a funk. You see, in a state of complete morbidity, in an impasse. I don't want to be like daddy, but I have no other males to know what to be like. So I'm now plunged into a necrophilus. I identify with my mom, and therefore identify with every complaint that she's got against the father. And there I stay. Now, these were called embodied imagos. Right. So the masculine imago that now gets embodied in your superego is going to be very, very an imperfect one. Now do you see how a millennial is born? How a hipster? How a soy boy? How a social justice warrior? He's embodied the archetype of the male. But what kind of male is it? We're breaking this down now. And it has nothing to do with actual reality. It's to do with a pseudo-reality because the child is identifying with the mother. This is the problem. I can't know what to do now. She's telling me what not to be, and I agree, but I don't know what to be. So do you see what this means? It means an over-identification with the mother. If I can't, see, I'm organically, naturally wanting to identify with both parents, and that's crucial to my development, absolutely crucial to the development of the superego and God knows what else. My entrance into the solar world depends on it, but I'm not able to. Because of her skewed interference with the process, which Fromm refuses to ever relate with, or Eli Sagan and all these other feminized guys, they don't ever mention any of this, and I can assure you they don't. What will be the result of this is the over-identification with the terrible mother, hence the feminization of the male, hence his later entering into the solar world as a beta. There you have it, in just a couple of slides. But let's move on.
Hatred of the father may also arise if he fails to come to the rescue of his son or daughter, providing a refuge against the terrible mother. A father can be a chivalric male or wholly feminized male. If a child fails to respect a father and sees him as a willing or fearful agent of the mother's will, he is not likely to interject healthy parental imagos. He may then become delinquent and may rebel against authority. He is likely to be suspicious of the solar world and eager to point out its faults. And in parentheses, there's a question that asks, is this the origin of atheism?
Right. Now, this is what happens when there is an imperfect father figure, when he is a dork. But what this really means when you break it down is that this is when the son goes to the father hoping to get some sort of rationality and finds out to his horror that the father is just really ultimately an agent of his mother's will, of the wife's will, because he in himself is deeply feminized, deeply insecure, and probably even a beta. Uh-oh. So I'm not with a masculine man. I'm with what's either I call in the book a feminized masculine, a feminized male, or a chivalric male. And both of these are not going to work. Now, most kids today are brought up by one or both, because the other one has been bred out. The masculine man barely exists. So this is another tragedy. So the child now is turning, even if there is well, I mean, the worst case scenario is there's not even a father there at all of any kind. That's what's happening now. That's how bad things have got. We're just going stage by stage, right? It's actually gone way worse. But even when there is a father figure in the house, or a stepfather figure in the house has been brought in, how do we know what kind of creature that is? And so the child is either going to identify with a very toxic masculine presence, and then some of what Erich Fromm is talking about, the negs, yeah, I now agree that at this stage they may start happening. You may despise this kind of male figure in your life. You may hate him. That comes on later, but Fromm wasn't saying that. You got to work out these little twists and turns that they play with you in their writing. He wasn't talking about that. He was talking that the male archetype and the male stereotype is evil from the outset, absolutely from the bottom up, inside out and upside down, all false, all patently false. I can't even believe that the man wrote this. But if you're being paid by the Tavistock Institute or the Frankfurt School, you have to own up. You have to speak, their language. You have to, because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So even if the mother is not contaminating the image of the masculine, and it turns out that the masculine is a bit of an anti-masculine type, the child embodies it, and it's not right. It's imperfect. Then there's going to be conflict. Then there's going to be a certain amount of reaction and hatred, maybe. But we just settle for confusion. Deep constitutional and sexual confusion. And it is at this point that there can be now a rebound, right? Depending on what age this is, back to the female, back to the feminine, because that did feel a bit safer. See, when the child now goes forward into the masculine world, but enters the scenario we've just spoken about, where the males that he's meeting are pretty distasteful characters, or even sadistic, or aggressive, or something wrong, something off, that the child can't identify, the masculine child cannot identify, naturally, as anyone would, it will recoil back to where things were safe. And that's what the terrible mother's hoping for. So now do you know why women bring in ghastly men into their lives? Why they get rid of a good father to replace him with some layabout stepfather? This happens epidemically in our society. Police are always coming in and social workers to pick up the pieces of this. It's more common than you can imagine. Good man put through the courts, put through the mangle, squeezed for his finances, while she beds down with some absolute gambling, low-life, dope-smoking drunk and passes that off for a father. The son and the daughter cannot identify with the trash that he is. He may even start abusing them, depriving them. And the mother knows, come back, kids. You didn't want to be with me and you don't want to stay within the Stygian nightmare. Okay, I'll give you some solar reality. But I'm watching the clock. I'm watching the clock. I know you'll be back. And that's what's happened across the planet. So the guy that they say is the couch potato who's sitting at home in mom's basement, this is the one we're describing right now. But it's even more than that. Okay? The comfort, the relative comfort of a very murky Stygian world becomes more attractive than the solar world through this dynamic. Now, this does not exonerate the drunken bum that's sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day. He's a fucking scum of the earth, and I agree. That's why I am not a person who's lauding the masculine world like people would try to rebut my work by thinking, what's wrong with him? He's supporting the patriarchy. Hell no. I'm telling you where this rotten type comes from. We're doing a deeper dive into the negativity of the masculine principle. And when the masculine male, or when the non-masculine male, you see, this guy could be wearing a Harley Davidson t-shirt and a cap and sitting there with his motorcycle outside, right? Mr. Tough Guy, Mr. Grease Monkey, right? He can look tough, but he's feminized. I don't fall for that. He's the chivalric man. And women seem to love that type. But he's only of use. What they don't understand, that it's like a Rottweiler on a chain. The woman is squealing with laughter at the power that she has over thugs like that, using them as a hammer to get her children into line, to keep them in the Ouroboros enclosure, to keep them regressive. The whole thing is nightmarish and stinks. That's why if you've ever experienced families like this, it's not something makes your skin crawl. No wonder. So I'm not exonerating the males who fall into that category, because they are willing accomplices. You have Morgane Le Fay, but you've got Mordred that really exercises her will against the great King Arthur and Lancelot and the heroes, right? Who the hell is this creature when it's home? And so the world is filled with these 1 and 2 imagos. And then by the woman identifying with them mostly, number 4 is almost bred out of existence. Doesn't even exist. And if he does, he's alone.
And I just want to interject, when you say the 1 and 2 imagas, you're talking about the feminized male, and the chivalric male is 1 and 2, and the goodly, sagely man is imago number 4. Is that correct? Okay. These are types, There's a program I have that'll explain it much more deeply on Enslaved called Women and the Unconscious.
Yes.
It's actually a series. It's a series of 4 parts, but part 1 is all people need to watch. You can sign up for a month and watch it. You see, so we're describing all the types that you're going to bump into and meet. See, the real tough guy doesn't allow himself to be pushed around by no woman, especially no terrible woman. Right? He's a smart aleck. He's got the message. He knows what he's dealing with. But there's no such people. These 3rd and 4th imagos, and particularly the 4th, they don't exist. They've been systematically bred out because the woman feels very uncomfortable in their presence. Right?
There is a certain attraction, repulsion to that type. I'll give you some background now that we are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, the other three imagos are completely under her power. They're like mice to the cat. So the cat just licks her lips and is not in any fear of the first three imagos. She knows how to work them. She's been working them for centuries. They're no threat, but they're also not very, they're not wholly attractive because of that. They fawn. They're easy meat. Number 4, although nowadays bred out, this is what's been happening in the last, since the 70s. However, when she should encounter a 4, it's very rare that that'll happen, but if and when it does, she is for a while extremely intrigued and attracted. Briefly. Because of course he is not somebody that is under her Stygian power. And that's very attractive. She wants to know what makes him tick. She can read his thoughts. She can see this guy's immune to me. He is a man who's going to bring out a higher part of myself that I myself have long ago mutilated and buried. He reflects a part of me that I detest. And she wants to come out in his presence. So for a while, I'll toy with that. I kind of am a bit turned on by that. He facilitates my anima. And for a while, that feels very, very odd and strange and numinous and magical. Sadly, it's doomed to failure. There's not a woman on the planet who goes through the whole process, as the man will soon find out. And he'll have to deal with his projections. That's another conversation. But the female, after the honeymoon period is over and she realizes what this means, that she now has to jump up the octave and leave the other ways, and that is requiring a kind of work. It's an upgrade in her humanity, in her very essence as a woman. Mm-hmm. See, that's why I'm not a woman hater. I'm facilitating this octave jump.
Very much so.
That's what my vision is. And that's what the great artists of the world were trying to paint. Plus, they were also trying to portray its nemesis, the vampire woman, the negative woman, who doesn't reach it, who remains in the sewers. So number 4, we can't talk much more about it, but it's very intriguing, this connection. But it's so rare that it's off the map. It doesn't even work. And when it does, it's mostly a kind of a flirtation, a temporary flirtation. When the woman feels this higher being within her stir, it will cause a meltdown of unimaginable psychic proportions. And she'll make sure she chains the lady. She'll chain the anima back up into the attic, and all hell will break loose in her psyche, because the anima is not about to be chained. The anima is not about to be hinterlanded. And so the kind of meltdown that we see amongst women today is entirely based in the anima coming back in a demonic form. You and I have talked about that before.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense once you've had it explained. Yeah, definitely. I just want to say, just to jump in real quick, this is why it's so important to watch the previous episodes as well, because we do speak about these things. So yeah, sorry about that, Michael. Please continue.
Oh, no. Well, we can move on with the slides. What else is there?
And what are we to think about a child's final reactions and thoughts when those he has been so assiduously modeling himself on are then found to be hypocrites and deceivers, or worse? What is the child to do? He cannot simply uninstall the programming of years and change his orientation without sustaining some kind of psychic damage. A quote from Erich Fromm in his work, Anatomy of Human Destructiveness.
That's right. So when he reaches teenage years and discovers that all this effort of his adolescence to embody imagos, to base himself on these twin peaks that turn out to be absolute flunkies, he's in a state of turmoil. He or she is in a state of turmoil. We already said that the unpretty girl will be in a state of turmoil. Suicidal, we know this from facts now that have come to light, but the suicides. She's in a state of turmoil because the promise of an evil mother to saying, you're going to, kick ass out there. You're going to get everything you need through abusing sexuality. Doesn't come to pass. So she's seething with a hatred against the beautiful woman that goes down below the pit of hell. This is the entrance to the darkest pit of hell in terms of spite and anger. Seething. It comes, the mother is also, you know, a focal point, but of course, remember, there's repression involved, so you don't, it's taboo to accept it, and women will not go to the mother. They will, in fact, they blanket it by feminism. So feminism, the Frankfurt School knew that they can initiate the blanketing, that women who are in this terrible, terrible state of deep matrophobia, one of the ways that they will deny it is to create a blanket projection that everything female needs to be glorified, to smother it. As a consequence of that, the male world falls into the crosshairs as being the one that you now attack, even when it's completely not guilty. Simple dynamic. But even before you get to that, and then we talk about the male child, he's in state of turmoil because he realizes the same thing, that the imagos that he's embodied will not suffice. There's like running out of gasoline on, you know, the wheel comes off and you're in the ditch, and you're only teenage life, and you're exhausted. You reaching the world, you can see, is not going to happen. Other kids seem smoother, more efficient in college and school. You admire them. They're untrammeled. They seem competent, effervescent, smooth. You're not. You're a wreck. And so this is when the teenage angst, you know, starts coming in, and maybe even hitting the bottle and hitting drugs, and you don't know what it is, or you become violent, or you become delinquent. You don't know what's even causing it. You just lose interest in study and school because those are all cerebral things. And of course, your body's screaming. You're not going to be interested in intellectual things now because the body is unleashing the emotional plague of years and years of pent-up rage. So you'll take this out in gang activity, criminal activity, graffiti, breaking the rules, breaking the law, doing everything that you can, you see. And then, of course, it even sometimes manifests in self-mutilation. So the piercings and the tattooing and God knows what else. And of course, it can be in adolescence too, the tics, all of that, the tantrums, the bad behavior, the bullying, all the things that you can list. Bedwetting, teeth grinding, stuffing your hands into your pockets, fidgeting. All of this is the burning hatred, the burning rage inside coming out, because you have to, you know, even breakouts. It's endless when you get into all the tics. And then when you get teenage years, you start identifying with the goths and the punks and the rockers. You see all of this. Anything that strikes back at the parents comes from this. Teenage rebellion. And all of that stands for. It's understandable. So it comes when you've realized that you've idealized hypocrites, flunkies. And you may not still be able to go to the source. You see this all the time on certain shows. These Dr. Phil-like shows where a gothic chick goes to confront evil parents and then is hugging them on the doorstep. So full of rage on the camera 2 seconds before, and then when they actually meet, they're hugging and crying. The hypocritical bastards. And she's learned to be hypocritical like them. There's no anger because it's all suppressed, it's taboo, and the parents know it, they get off on it. The parents have an inner knowledge that nothing's going to happen. Read Alice Miller. They won't break the fourth commandment. Honor thy mother and father, no matter what they've done. And that edict remains over and over again. And so the child is doomed to processing their anger, guess where? To their own children. You see how the cycle goes? When these hypocrisies are realized, if you're not able to speak up and stand up and go back to the source from which they came and confront them openly, in letter or by verbal, you know, whatever, and just even consciously know who the culprits are. We haven't got there yet in our society. And you can't talk to anybody else because they don't want to listen. Well, there's one source that you can go to that will have to listen because you have them strapped down. And it's called a child. And so the terrible mother is reborn in the daughter, that realizing that the world ain't listening to you, the world is anti-psychological, and you are a wreck. You haven't even got the guts to go and face these people. You don't want to listen to the truth. But there's one poor little creature that you can torture to exercise your own rage. And that's your own child and your own children. And so round and round we go. It's like something from a Hieronymus Bosch painting. These are the 9 circles of hell. This is the real hell. That people don't, you don't need to worry about no afterlife hell. This is it in this life. And the male is no different. He can breed, he can torture. This is the sad affair. So you call me misogynist, whatever name they want to call me, I'm thinking of the children. I don't give a fuck what you call me. I'm bulletproof to all of that. Any humanitarian seeing this problem of the emotional plague will be motivated, and he's not interested in your, silly attacks. What might have, what woman hurt you, Michael? Then that's the level you think? That's what you think I'm motivated by? You see the state of the children today? And that's not enough of a motive? It's not. People are writing books thinking, well, it's too much internet time. Yeah. We just need to get them off their iPhones. Okay? Yeah. Big thick book, 600 pages. Yeah. Solved it. I'm from Princeton, by the way. Nice to meet
New
you.
New York Times bestseller right there.
Yes, that's right. I'll go on any amount of talk shows that I know you only got 3.5 minutes. So I can do my shtick in 3.5 minutes. It's all part of the game, part of the circus. And also, nobody's going to contradict me, really, at the end of the day. And even if they do, I'm smart with that. I've worked out my TV time spiel. So we're good. We can handle that. And this is what America's done. This is the contract America plays. These sound bites. Yeah, get the kids off the internet. Mom, Dad, get more restrictions on the cell phone time. Get more parental guidance tools. Be more monitoring to your teenagers after it's all over. We don't want that rage spilling over. So come on. But not mentioning that now these fucking necrophilous parents are just itching to be grandparents so they can assuage their own guilt about how they treated you, so that if you happen to birth some brat, they can spoil the fuck out of it in some sick guilt complex, and we also accept that. And then you bring your child to these monsters because you can't accept that they were monsters? Oh, well, I'm a parent now and I find it difficult too. So, Mom, you're forgiven. Dad, you're forgiven. Ha ha ha. Giggles all round. Party on. I forgive you. What is this? When is anybody going to take responsibility? Nobody does. The guy who's writing the book trying to help the teens is himself a father or a mother who's probably one of the most feminized little fucking betas in his own life. But he's jumped through the hoops at school. He's got himself a PhD. He's a sociologist. He's read some tripe. He has no idea about the history of child abuse. He hasn't read your Alice Millers or your Neil Postmans or anybody else. Camille Paglia. Doesn't know anything about what we're talking about. Doesn't need to. Doesn't notice that the best men in the world have been bred out because women show no interest in them. And men men will style themselves on what women want. When they know what women want, men will adapt and they will lose their masculinity. And this feminization of our world is reaching into every fucking corner. What you can say, the word police, the thought police, the Orwellian state. Everybody's offended. They weren't offended in New York City in the 1950s by anything. What happened in the meantime? You see? So these disgusting writers who played up to this feminized, they wrote some of the manifestos. They gave the women these staples as they climbed. It wasn't just female writers. It was men who realized what was taking place, and they're deeply implicated in all of this. So when people want to know where is this Tsarion coming from, very hard to find out what. Right, this is what it's about. I've read all of the women's studies books. I've read all of their work, and through my critical apparatus, I'm able to see where they've gone wrong, and hopefully this makes sense to a lot of people. Because the critical theorists cannot criticize themselves. Do not. And that's their weakness. So you turn it around on them.
I'd also like to say, just as a woman, like if we're honest with ourselves, if we are honest with ourselves, what Michael's saying is true. And yes, of course, there's going to be nuances. I'm not trying to say that it's exactly the same for every person, but across the board, what he's saying as far as describing root causal factors as to the state of affairs, the lack of creativity we see in the architecture, the lack of creativity we see in the music, the mental health problems that people are experiencing, the societal discord and the factions and the infighting. If we're being honest with ourselves, men didn't do this themselves. We are key contributors, and the logic is solid as far as I'm concerned. And so, that's my take on it as a woman who's just being honest with myself about the situation and what Michael's saying and taking it into deep consideration and feeling into that. Is it true? Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to what Michael's saying. So again, like I said, you can get triggered, but if you get triggered to the point that you end up becoming deaf to what he's saying because your emotional reactions are that loud, that violent, then you're missing out on some incredible wisdom here.
See, any man or woman that raises a child, going back to the daughter who's pretty, does any father want her flaunting her ass around fucking, in the male world and becoming a prostitute, a whore, a seductress? I don't think so. No, a 4 male, even a 3, is not going to want that. So the mother will not pick a 3 and a 4. The woman who's going to, the evil mother, the temptress mother, who has all the intention in the world at basking in the light of her beautiful daughter, is not going to marry a man who's going to be against it. She's going to want to hang around men who are all for it. And that's exactly what's happening. Of course, now, as I said, it's worse. They don't even have a man around anyway who's going to interfere at all. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. But the male influence comes on later. It's primarily a derivative thing in the first place. It only even starts to be important after the phallic stage, as you move into what's known as the latency and then the genital. And the latency and genital phases, which leads you up to about 7 years old, maybe even after periods, is when you start to realize the other person's existence out in the world, outside the family constellation. So really, it's the first 3 stages that are the most important because they're inside the constellation. This is when the mother has the greatest power. Right? Now, because of the incestuous symbiosis, when you are arrested in the oral and anal, you are completely involved with the mother in this incestuous way. Therefore, naturally, she is the priority. Your identification has to be with her, regardless, and only secondarily with the father. You see this already. So in your identification with the masculine, with the feminine, this is going to prioritize your vision of the world. You'll never identify with the masculine principle as much as you do with the mother because of the incestuous symbiosis. You don't have the incestuous symbiosis with the father. In fact, what you're doing is he represents the breaking of that symbiosis. That's when you saw it talk about hardcore facts. This is the solid evidence. That's what the male represents. Now, the terrible woman, the terrible mother, is one who violates this trajectory and this organic truth. She wants to arrest the development of both children. And if there's only two options. One is to continue forever the incestuous symbiotic connection, which you find in, say, Indian families, all sorts of weird Oriental families, right? The mother doesn't want any break. And you get this in the West. Or if it looks like, well, that's not going to happen, hard luck on you. Okay, I am destined to send my child into the solar world, but I'll do so as an agent of my will. He's Mordred. Damn it, you're going into the solar world, all right, but you will be feminized. I will influence you so much that you'll be poison when you enter in there. You'll do my will. And that's exactly what's been happening for centuries. So what we're doing is unpacking what we call feminism. It's really feminization. And it even has atavistic roots, which we've all talked about before, with the lie of paternity, another whole vast subject, we've done on Enslaved, and how the media, which is mostly run by either homosexual men or mostly women. The women run all the fashion magazines, all the fashion and cosmetic industries. And if there's men involved, they're not men. They're these simps. So they don't count. It's a feminine-run system that then tells you that women have been objectified. Are you having me on? That's so transparently false. You see? So we're living deeply in contradictions. But when the terrible mother arrests both, and of course, if the girl isn't super pretty, well, a different slight dynamic can happen. We've already explained the tragedy of that, where she will feel totally betrayed. She will absolutely despise her rival, the beautiful female in school. You've seen the movie Carrie, right? And others that have gone into this. And my God, the hatred there is the definition of true hatred. So when Erich Fromm is talking about hatred, something to do with some father figure, not what nonsense. Real hatred is either matrophobia or a 5 girl to a 10. And he didn't know that? He dare tell me? And then, you have to use your critical ability to go, I don't fucking think so. But that takes experience. That takes you to go out into the world and get it and understand the catfighting, the venom, the absolute hair-pulling hatred. It's not even concealed anymore. Luckily, a lot of things I'm talking about right now are, visually filmed. The optics are there. You can't be denied. But when you have the things on this individual level taking place, unfortunately, this then spills out into the culture. The culture is replicating the stereotypical situation. Yeah, and that's what the whole culture is now bankrupt because of this. And there were a couple of men in the past who wrote about this in a very, very long time ago. Maybe on a different program we'll maybe delve into that a little bit, because there's some absolutely astonishing predictions of this in the 1700s and 1800s. Oh yeah, both in America and in Britain. Every single detail. Yeah, every single detail of what's happening socially was predicted.
I'd like to hear their takes on it, because it's we make assumptions that, and I'm not saying that's everyone who's listening, but just as a culture, we kind of make assumptions because we're technologically advanced that we're wise, and that's just not true. There's so much wisdom from the past, so I'd love to hear their takes for sure. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, there's three I can think of, and that's enough. Boy, my goodness.
Mm.
I can send you some information on that
Okay.
down the line, But it's very important to be able to break this down in a very cogent way, because a lot of it has happening sort of non-consciously, like this teenage rage, the rebel without a cause syndrome. And the implications of it are really far-reaching, because in any period where, and I'm thinking epocally here, really zooming out, there's only a certain tolerance that the human psyche has to this kind of malignancy before a breaking point is reached, like critical mass. So, in other words, the lie can only live forever. Because we live in a moral universe, there's only so much bullshit in terms of the human dynamic that can be tolerated. And when Freud talked about the Thanatos instinct, he was thinking big. His mind was very, very much on Spengler, on Schopenhauer, and on even other philosophers that talked about the brevity of civilizations, that nothing was permanent. And one day when you look under the hood, you'd be surprised to find out what's happening in the Alice in Wonderland's kitchen doesn't breed much hope. Oh my God, this thing's ready to blow up any minute.
Yeah.
And your religions and other things that are meant to, patch it up, that looks like that's busting wide open. With the Nietzsche God is dead number. It was just an embodiment of that fear that we're heading for decadence and nihilism, that all the glue was coming apart. And this then brings up, where you have ancient peoples, including the Celtic races, predicting pathocalypse, what I call pathocalypse. And so a point comes where it's out of your control. You may even know what the remedies are. You may have an eureka moment in your laboratory going, we got it. But it's too late. The zombies are running wild. So that's where I think we are. And that's why in my latest book called Existentialism and the Search for Meaning, you can find it on Substack, I talk about misosophy, the hatred of wisdom. I talk about a theory of everything. When I confront head on this absolute abyssal, instinct, and the idea that we are all seeking for oblivion. We're tired of our own selves. And that an Armageddon, we actually secretly want it. It is Thanatos dominating. And the wise ones who see this coming are going to just be standing on the balcony, with their megaphone. Nothing's going to happen. It's impossible to stop the meltdown. It's a stampede. And each and every person who's in that stampede has no idea of what we're talking about. They just feel something that wants the oblivion. Right? We were warned by Otto Rank and other people that, look, we want surrogate wombs. And that the prime directive of most minds is to create those surrogate wombs everywhere we go. From your humble theater and Hollywood and the movie business, all the way up to even more extraordinary, iterations of it. But the greatest womb metaphor of all is annihilation, oblivion. The schizoid's already halfway there because he says, if I can negate selfhood, I won't suffer. The average Buddhist, the Zen master, what a joke. A Zen master, right. We fell for that. But any of this Eastern tripe is a womb. Come over here to the Ganges, turn off your ego and your mind. Do you know what that means? What they're really saying is come back to the womb. Come back to the pleasure principle. We'll offer you, what was the word we used? Oh yeah, nirvana. That seems to have some magical effect, that word. Samadhi. Mm-hmm. We have perfected over the thousands of years more fish hooks for this fishing expedition. You just wave the carrot of some sort of higher dimension or spiritual enlightenment. And these Johnnies, these schmucks from the West, they come running. They think it's the wisdom that they've been missing in the West. You can't convince them otherwise. Just parade around with your bald head and your fucking orange robes, and you're in. Maybe we can link up to my article, Stilling the Mind. It's a short article, but it'll walk people through this nightmare. And it wasn't good enough that we had to go over there to find it. We bloody imported it. With the spiritualist movement and the New Age movement, importing this nonsense. So there's another womb metaphor. And now we've got this cult of non-dualism, courtesy of the internet. Non-dualism. My God. And it's growing traction. It's there. And there's millions of subscribers. And they're throwing up people's champions all the time with it. So I've done a couple of programs, and I wrote an article, Contrarium, to hopefully bring people back to sanity. But as I said, you really won't be able to. Everything is moving, like a titanic lava flow towards this oblivion point, motivated by the lie, motivated by pandemonium.
Yet there are some that are listening, though. Sorry to interrupt. There are people that hear you.
Yeah.
Just want to say
no, that's absolutely right, and it's very important that there are. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it will only be those few who can really deeply understand this. Because there are no solutions. Your Jordan Petersons, your Russell Brands, and all of that. Charlie Kirks, they may mean well. You may have 1,000 more jump up in their place. It's not going to be the salvation. It's not even a temporary balm anymore. You try going back to the church, you're going to curse the fact that you did that in a couple of years when you find out just how bankrupt the thing is. And when you come out again with a crisis of faith. And some people, even before that, even within 18 months, you'll realize, I trusted these pastors, these clergymen. What was I thinking when I did it? What motivated? Well, it might have been a good instinct. It might have been, you might have been in such a state of distress that this might have been the only thing that you could turn to at the time, But then other people are going to Islam. You think that's a solution? Other people are going to atheism. You think that's a solution? Other people are just going back to hedonism. Party till you drop. Isn't that another kind of oblivion? And then we have the four types: the schizoid, the depressive, the obsessive compulsive, and the hysteric. And those are only four. They're coping mechanisms, all designed to in some way smother the self and the voice of the self, which is also the conscience, which is also the voice that floods you with shame. We can't have that interfering with our prime directive, which is to adjust to the sick crowd to get the approval that we need, and then that'll lower guilt. Lowering of guilt, whether I have to take a pill to do that, or I go and join the crowd and get the approval of the madman in the thugocracy. you see, or focus on some stupid narrow cause that I become obsessive about. All of these ways to lower anxiety. But when I do that, I might lower anxiety of the neurotic kind, but I raise the frequency of shame that speaks, from my conscience that I'm doing something inauthentic. I'm violating the rules of the self. Oh dear, how pesky, how annoying. That's what Freud called legitimate suffering, as opposed to neurotic misery. So the whole world is interested only in one thing: pacifying the latter, the neurotic misery. And that's why Big Pharma came in. Hey, we'll handle it. And we went, go ahead, produce more pills. It's a simple thing. Don't give us existential psychology. Don't give us existential philosophy. This is the way. We believe in Big Pharma. It'll knock it out. I've been talking about this since Architects of Control and before, the program. On and on and on. Hasn't changed a thing. You can have the intellectual knowledge that, okay, that's not the problem, it's this. But who's going to work on it? Who's going to do it? Who will be allowed? But we have 101 ways, and then you get these 4 types. And that's just 4 of many. You can have much, much worse, right? Schizophrenia, psychosis. But each of the types, or the neurotic types, and sadly, the schizoid and the depressive, that's why I'm bringing this up, is because if you're not looking too closely, those 2 types can appear to be outsiders in the authentic way. Wanted to bring this up. Yeah, hysteric, it looks like exactly what they are. Hysterical lunatics, welded to the world of sensation. The obsessive compulsive looks to most people as a nutter. He's been lampooned in the media a million times, right? He's transparent, neurotic. There's nothing virtuous about them, really. They're a bit of a laughingstock. But if you're not careful, a schizoid personality type and a depressive, if you're not looking too closely and you have no psychological knowledge, guess what? They can come across as rather mystical. They might even think that they are in their own hearts, right? In their own daily persona. We talked about this before. The depressive, sitting like the thinker, can appear to be a jaded, right, person who's questioning the big mysteries of life. He's in his funk. The Irish are good at this. Sitting at the end of the pub with their pint of Guinness, half soused, right, with some flowery ballads, you see, in this sort of pseudo-romantic way. And they can look fucking, whoa, deep, poetic. Can really look like they've got a number, that they really see the dark side of society. They write about it. They wax lyrical about it. But of course, once you look under the patina, you'll see, oh, wait a minute. They're not genuine at all. And the schizoid is the same. He can even look more mystical even than he can look more authentic than even the depressive. Because the depressive can, in many cases get you down and you might not like their company. There's all sorts of rough edges there. But the schizoid can look like a real sage. Because the closest being he looks like is a stoic. And there's something about there's a quirk of human, a trait that stoical people look spiritual. They look removed. They look effervescent. They look untouched. A perfect example of this would be Mr. Spock in the Star Trek series. Detached, wise, untrammeled, slightly icy, but deeply wise. Okay? Now, Mr. Spock was those things, but a schizoid personality type can look very much the same if you're not looking too closely and you don't know. And you can spend years befriending somebody like that and looking up to them thinking there's something really, quite attractive about this person. Until you realize, oh, no, they're dead. They're characterologically dead. I'm talking to a mummy, a calcified, frozen soul. But he knows how to give you this. They got their shtick, they got their story. But the detached persona that they have, this kind of wooden, detached, it can pass for a kind of stoic, persona that is very, very attractive, because the two blur over. You can project onto them something of the animus, a male figure, and they know it. They'll bask in that for years. And by the way, once they know that this is the persona, they might even slightly window dress it by knowing a few phrases. They may dabble in a kind of spinner rack philosophy. You get this type. It becomes quite common, right? They know a little poetry. They know a little wisdom. They may become a Sufi. They may become a bit of a Baha'i or into Gurdjieff, or so they can actually embellish this image that they have. How are you going to know? How are you going to know?
Well, I would think the more that you know yourself, the more wisdom you develop. It's like a radar. I think you'd start seeing right through it. But isn't there a gradient there? The less you know, the less you're going to be able to see. Is that fair to say?
Well, this is the danger. So then you have to listen to people like myself, right? You have to check it out. You've got to discern, learn, because there is a big difference between a really genuine stoical, mystical type and then the schizoid personality type. Yeah. Don't fall for the simulated version. And also with the depressive, be a bit careful. Treat everybody cordially, but keep your wits about you. Just because somebody made a pit stop in life, just because they ran exhausted of the hedonistic lifestyle, and they're taking a breather, and you run into them at that time, and some of your conversation drifts into what you appear to be deep waters, don't be fooled. Do some more homework. Just because they picked up the Da Vinci Code when everybody else did, or reading some fucking Carolyn Miss when everybody else did. It takes more than that. Or listen to some fucking Wayne Dwyer, right? Bull crap on TV. Or Rhonda Byrne when it all got trendy, right? Don't be fooled. Check out other things in their life, what they've been doing in the past. Because a vast number of people who go towards the kind of deeper subjects only do so for a minuscule time in their life. And usually at this point, not out of authentic ardor, but because they're physically and mentally exhausted by their hedonic behavior, their gluttony, their insatiable, binging on the world, does in fact, funny enough, come to a sort of an end at something. You know astrology, the Saturn return would be a classic time for this. Classic.
Oh, especially the second one.
And the second one, exactly.
Like when you're 60. Yeah.
Right.
But definitely the 30. But when you're 60, if you really ignored that first Saturn return and then the second one rolls around, it's not a good time. That's time for depression.
Yeah. And there's other rites of passage where this can happen too. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. That's right. It comes back. Remember I said you can't bear it.
Mm-hmm.
But these 4 types that we're talking about are experts in suppressing that voice. It's what they're all about. These neurotic traits come out of the suppression of the voice of shame, the authentic shame. And because we don't have existential philosophy and psychology in the world, we don't have teachers. We don't have therapists that go into this, really, and we don't have school teachers who teach this. So there's no manual, there's no path out of it. You'll go through the whole of life and never hear what we're talking about. You won't even have a clue that such a reality even exists. Schizophrenia and psychosis are the more extreme versions. We don't have to talk about them because they're lesser, but they're still there. They're well known. But these 4 are very common. And the 2 that I mentioned are, I think, more dangerous. You know, the depressive and the schizoid, because they can fool you. You don't see them as neurotic. Now, most times you will, but there are schizoids and depressives where they can fool the fuck out of you. They really can. And you'll waste a lot of years. And when you finally wake up to what the hell the sacrifices, the emotions of love and care that you've given to these neurotic people, and why you've been getting so little back. Because you actually thought they were authentic, because they can look like that. A depressive person can feel, you know, can inspire your care, can inspire your love. They look jaded. And if you're psychologically disempowered, you can really, really start, you know, caring about people like that. And getting immersed in their world and thinking they're so authentic. They're so authentic. And when they realize that they're getting this kind of dollops of care from people, hey, there's a secret little, you know, smile. And they play it up. This is kind of good to go here. And the schizoid has no empathy one way or the other. They can't feel at all because remember they've killed themselves. The self has been so repressed in those people. But in this strange detachment, you can mistake that for a mystic, because the mystics have this strange detachment as well, but they're not schizoid. They're authentic. But how do you tell the difference? This is one of the built-in problems. That's why I address it. And then if the schizoid discovers this point that I'm making, that I can actually pose as a wise man. I'm schizoid, but I've learned from, you know, checking the world out, that if I call myself a Zen Buddhist, and that's easy, because I just go down the road to the local temple and sign on, that's become easy. I don't even have to go to the Ganges and put on a big act, spend a lot of money. No, there's all sorts of ways. I just go down to the Vedanta Center. And hell, I know how to sit cross-legged. I know how to grow a little beard. I know how to, yeah, I think I can pull this off. And the next thing you know, they've transmogrified themselves into a bloody bona fide mystic, entering into your home, speaking from stages all over the world, and getting the veneration and riches. Because the human race has no fucking discernment. No in fact, not only do they not have psychological insight, they hate the subject of psychology. That's a creation of the West. It's part of the Western philosophical tradition, by the way. If you didn't have Immanuel Kant, you couldn't have had Sigmund Freud. Right? So anyone in the know knows absolutely that psychoanalysis is an offspring of philosophy. Western philosophy. You put one drop of Western psychology into the East and the East is finished. It's a corrosive that will expose all those charlatans. So that's why they never invented it. And to make room for Eastern charlatanism in the West, you've got to push psychology out the door. That's a guest you have to get rid of before the other comes in. before the other tribe can gate crash. Out goes the psychology. You've got to lower your standard of psychological insight. You can't even have Wilhelm Reich around. We fucking definitely can't have Wilhelm Reich around. But you certainly couldn't have even Freud or anyone else. You can't have Alfred Adler. All of that has to go. You can't have Carl Jung. See, that's why Jung was so vehemently against Western people going to the East. He knew what he was talking about. He wrote on it. He warned his clients, watch out, don't get into it. And you don't need to. There's a healthy Western alchemical, mystical, philosophical tradition. And that's why he was into Hermeticism, astrology, mandalas, right? Alchemy. He had a real love of the German mystics. He was interested in tarot, you know, I Ching. That is from the East, of course, but it's on a, we're talking about a different level here of the old pre-Vedic teachings.
Exactly, exactly. It's the I Ching pulls no punches if you know how to use it properly. It's not playing. Yeah.
It's something from a different era, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who've checked out my work on Julian Jaynes know all about these kinds of early divinations. A lot of stuff was corrupted by the priests in the East, but that's a different topic, you know. So yeah, you got to watch out for these neurotic types because they can so easily finally become so hardened into what they're in that they become psychotic. That's when things are irreversible. While a person remains neurotic, there is always hope that some sort of genuine interest in psychology and change, they can change. Because a neurotic is defined by the fact that he kind of knows at the end of the day that something's wrong with him. But once this neurosis goes more towards the psychosis, that's over. And the psychotic is the one who completely thinks that they're normal and the only sane ones around, and that everyone else, including the world itself, is at fault. And nothing ever, 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 ever changes that perspective. That's why the word psychosis means. That's why it's the more extreme. Technically, when you're neurotic, there's a hope for you. But when you become borderline neurotic and you move towards the psychotic, it's all over. In fact, in my point of view, even when you're neurotic, it's pretty much over. You know, it's just I'm quoting you the theory. I'm not telling you what Michael believes. I'm telling you, you know, the theory is that a neurotic person, after a bit of therapy, will realize there is something wrong with them. After all, they are coming for therapy. The psychotic will never come to therapy. They don't think there's anything wrong with them. So psychologists never see psychotics unless they've been arrested. Psychotics are absolutely above accusation or guilt. When you ask them what's wrong with the world, they go, you are. The world is. Nobody understands little old me. I've only done what I think is right. And by the way, don't try to peg me down on an individual crime that you may have heard from somebody in my family, because I can explain all of that. And all it will be is that somebody else is to blame. The explanation, no matter how long-winded or what, will always be, oh yeah, well, we got it. Yeah, it was your own grandfather, it was your father, it was the poverty, it was... Look at the world, look at culture. The black people, right? Will tell you it's always white man oppressing them, making them pick cotton. The communists will always tell you it was the rich man oppressing. That's psychotic. These people are incapable of ever seeing personal responsibility. Incapable, so why engage them? And the individual psychotic is the same thing. And women today have become psychotic. None of them think of themselves as flawed. They think of themselves as absolute goddesses, as deified. They've even dredged up a lot of nonsense from the ancient past to believe that there was an ancient matriarchy. No, there wasn't. There was sacred prostitution, mass murder, watch my programs, and gynocracy unleashed. And things that, if I spoke about it now, you wouldn't even believe it. You know, but that's all been repurposed. manufactured during the 60s into a new phenomena so that the women could hang their hats on that. It's actually cronism is what they're involved in, not true goddess worship. None of them would even know what that meant or what that is. How could they? We've just talked about them having a poisoned anima. The real goddess has come back in a demonic form. And do you think I'm going to trust them and believe them? They've already violated the goddess within them.
Would it also be fair to say that they're arrested before that phallic stage? I'm just looking at the remaining slides, and I see the next one is phallic stage. And as you're talking about this, it sounds to me that they wouldn't have moved into that stage, and that might be why they keep sucking.
Well,
in a sense, like,
no,
I don't know how else to say it.
I think that is true for a certain part. The unpretty girl may not. The pretty girl is definitely passed through the phallic, has to, if she's going to live out the mother's sexual fantasies.
Ah, okay.
And be the seductress. That's inevitable. But an unpretty girl who hasn't been made maybe the same promise, yeah, for all you know, and these are the ones who end up being very obese and everything, right? Yes, that's true. But read those slides, then.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I got sidetracked.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that we definitely look into them too. And it sounded like that's where you were going. So, all right, then 1 second here. I'll bring it up.
Phallic stage. The seductive mother wishes to preserve her incestuous symbiosis with her boy child and prevent him from reaching the phallic stage. In this state, the child experiences the father's presence as an intrusion. This distaste of the male may linger on into later years. The child may become rebellious and anarchic. As an unheroic type, he may support the fall of the masculine world. In extreme cases, he becomes interested in transsexuality.
Yeah. Just compressing what we've already said. Since the father's presence is mostly going to come on later, it is already contaminated by the perspective of the mother. That's bad enough. And then he is there only after the phallic period. He comes into focus more after that. But during those early years leading up to the phallic, he's a fucking intrusion. And for the arrested child, he remains an intrusion right up to the development of the superego. So the superego will embody a male who really shouldn't even be there, who's something that is sort of a antagonistic and hateful. Fromm give us a false impression of why the father's hateful. I'm now giving you the correct one. And Fromm knows this. The psychologists know this, what I'm saying. That because of the symbiosis with the mother, the father's presence is largely an intrusion. It's meant to be that way. You can't change it. It'll change only later. Nature has it ordained this way, that the woman, the mother, is supreme. She is the dragon mother. She has dominion. So the father's presence is mostly an intrusion. This is where Freud got it wrong, thinking that it's a sexual attraction to the mother and a hatred of the father. He built that out of this, what I'm talking about. And it had to be amended. It was a little grotesque, a little garish. Maybe some elements of truth, but others later on saw that you need to widen this out. You know, your Julius Christivas following on from Otto Rank and on and on and on it goes, right? They broadened this out. But it's true to say that, yes, for the most part, the father is an intrusion. And therefore, this is going to affect the superego. And if it doesn't change, and the good side of the father figure is not finally discovered, then the child will enter the world antagonistically to the father principle, the male principle. And we see that all around us. Which means, again, that their mothers have tried to perpetuate and extend the period of symbiosis. Well, my God, we have a thing called fatherless homes. Everything what I'm saying is absolutely axiomatic. It's just that people might not be able to give it the definition that we've done. We're just defining what is a living experience now of many people in the West. This is the footnote that's been missing. And the real terrible mother wants to preserve the symbiosis for eternity. And that also is happening. This is why the grown-ups, the death of the grown-up. We did a program on that. Not you and I, but on Enslaved, right? It's horrific all over the world. They give the percentages. And when the man's mother dies or life forces them to go get married or whatever, they're not happy. Even if the physical presence of the mother isn't there, that child is going to be very, very discontent. He's still in the sway of the terrible mother, even though he may be alone, maybe a single male. And this is then when you get the blanketing, he becomes a feminist, missing the mother, but he's still in her power, under her thrall. He now starts idealizing the female sex. And he becomes a little monstrous, necrophilous soy boy, fighting for women's rights. The women fucking hate him, right? You're just a useful idiot. But he's so insensitive, he doesn't get that. He doesn't realize that. He's backing them up. He's in the streets in San Francisco and Portland doing his thing. He's the cuckolded, simp. And women are expert down for the centuries. They've loved the eunuch. They've loved the castrati. This is the real, you want to know what a goddess tradition is? You wouldn't want to know how foul it was. My God. They had you castrating yourself in her name. Kali with her ring of skulls. Where do you think they came from? You can even see images of the blue Kali standing on top of what looks like a demon, but it's actually a male figure. It's female gynocracy all the way. This vampire goddess. And history is full of them. I've done program after program on this. The monstrous feminine. People can look it up on Enslaved. The monstrous feminine. There's one called subtitle Goddesses of Blood. Never has information like that been released in this movement. What I put in there. And there's another one I've got called Blood Rights. It's a premium program, Blood Rights. You see if you can stomach that. So we get all this. You see, because the Medusan mother wants to keep you enthralled, even when you physically grow up. And as I said, there's a point comes where the infection or the pestilence goes so deep that you can't live with it anymore. You know that you have to annihilate yourself. You get to set yourself on fire. Culturally, you need cultural suicide is next. So why opening? What do you think opening the borders is to the horde of orcs and all the 100 other ways? The children are the measure of what's going on. The law courts, the divorce courts are the measure of what's going on. See, because the chronism, the gynocracy is on steroids. You won't be able to rein it in. That wasn't the plan. Man is so pig ignorant when it comes to these matters. You wouldn't believe the movement I'm involved in. They put crucifixes on the door when they see me coming. You're one of the few people who even has time for this.
Which I find so strange, honestly, because, what can I say? I was always an outsider, even when I didn't want to be. It was just who I am. It's who I've always been. Even as a little kid, some of my earliest memories were stop being yourself. And it would be so distressing because it's like, well, I can't help it. Even when I'm trying to be like you guys, I'm still the outsider because that's just who I am. I just had to accept it. So when I say that, what I'm saying is that when you say this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, this makes sense. It's all adding up. It's logical. And yeah, at times you hear stuff and it's like, oh, that cuts, but it's like, because I've been that. I've acted that way, or I'm still doing it, so the trigger comes up because there's something there. But in any case, yeah, it's just, I find that sad that there's not a lot of people of interest in this, because to me, this topic matters what's helping promote sanity, promote objectivity, promote the ability to actually see reality and not be in a psychotic state, which I do agree with you. As a culture, we've been conditioned to be psychotic. You'd have to be to live in this kind of a paradigm that's so, we'll say, antithetical to natural laws and principles and morality and conscience. So to me, it's just like, I would prefer not to be insane. I would much prefer sanity. So I'm very interested to hear these things and learn. Yes.
That's all it takes. Yeah, I agree with you. That's all it takes. It's not controversial to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is why we had to do this. I wanted to give the official line so people have a coordinates to what is making this Tsarion guy tick. It's literary criticism. It's being able to discern where they're going wildly wrong, probably because of some other script. It can't be ignorance. These are people at the highest, positions of the totem pole academically. So yeah, it's a bit sinister, a bit weird. But then you find out, you do the conspiracy aspect of it, comes to bear. I'm not shy about that. See, almost 100% of other people who are into psychology won't talk about the conspiracy. They don't even know what it is. So there's a big handicap in that movement. They may tell you some interesting things, but the moment that you start bringing up, the hidden hand of control, they just lose it. They'll think of you as a kook. They'll think of you as a paranoiac. Because, the most of them are institutionalized. And the ones who are into conspiracy, well, as we know, they're not into psychology at all. Back in 2010, when I started doing programs that linked the two, I was the first. There's even programs that go back to 2003, where I did this for the first time. But in 2010, I really ramped it up. And we've had nothing since then to match it.
Yeah, I've not seen anything, to be honest.
No. Yeah. I was hoping that was going to change, but it wasn't. In fact, things often went in the completely opposite direction, which I already predicted. I knew that was going to happen. So I just kept on doing what I was doing, and also tried to do it in different ways, like the Female Illuminati program, project. I came at it from different points of view as well to make it more interesting. And maybe that helped.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do very much appreciate this approach in particular, of course, because I am a woman, but also because this is information that if a woman can hear it and receive it and listen and just consider it at the very, very least, what Michael is saying. Is there truth to what he's saying? Is there a logic? Is there credibility? Do you feel, based on what he's saying, uncomfortable? If there's a discomfort there, it very much may be likely that it's something in your unconscious that's creating a tension, right? That needs to be looked at. I'm not saying one way or the other what it is, because it's going to be very personal, but this is information that, the reason why I'm saying this is that this is a great approach, this show in particular, because we as women, as I've said in the intro to this show, we do have the power to change the world, and we are doing it even now. But what kind of change do we want to see? Do we want to promote life and sanity and health and well-being and courage and innovation and genius in our children and our own creations and our relationships with others? Do we want to facilitate and promote those things within ourselves as well? Because if we do, we need to recognize, just by the basic principle of cause and effect, that there's something causing the outcome that we're dealing with. And because we're individuals in a group, each individual is contributing on some level, which means women are also culpable. We need to understand why we're culpable, how we're culpable, and what we're contributing. And then if we need to shift, we do it. So Michael, I just want to say once again, as always, I very much appreciate what you're sharing. I appreciate your courage and your tenacity. I appreciate your meticulousness and your encyclopedic knowledge so much, because this is information very few are speaking about, if anyone, in the modern day. So to be able to have this conversation with you and share this with people who are listening, it's very much appreciated. Thank you once again.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Dark Side of the Female Psyche to a close. There's still more to come in this series, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified when the next episode is ready. More social media accounts may be added in due time. If that interests you, bookmark willfullyevolvingwoman.com and check back periodically. If you would like to follow Michael and learn more from him, you can find his works through the following channels: dragonmother.org, femalepsychology.org, and of course, michaeltsarion.com. Michael also hosts a weekly podcast with David Whitehead. You can view the Unslaved podcast by becoming a member through unslaved.com or via the Unslaved Substack, substack.com/@unslaved. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and on behalf of Michael and myself, thank you for being here and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.